You are listening to Personal Development Mastery Podcast, where you will find both the inspiration to grow and the actions to implement towards your next level. I am your host, Agi Keramidas, and my mission is to inspire you to stand out and live your best life. I interview thought leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, spiritual teachers, exceptional people who will inspire you to improve your life and offer, through their wisdom, actions you can take and implement. Tune in for 2 new episodes each week and make sure you follow the podcast to get the episodes as soon as they are released. I am delighted to share the conversation I had with Simon Paul Sutton. Simon has recently released his autobiography book called Burglar to Buddha, Transforming from the Inside Out. When I asked Simon to send me a short bio of his so I can use when I introduce him, he asked me instead to introduce him the way that I perceive him. This is an interesting and also a challenging concept. So here are some words that come to my mind when I think of Simon Paul Sutton. Exuberant, overflowing energy, divine being, passionate, transparent, sovereignty, and Gaianet. And I will add to that the description from Simon's book so you can understand what to expect from this conversation. So the book is called Burglar to Buddha, from an unconscious life of crime and drugs driven by fear to a conscious life of awareness, living high on love and truth in service to that which is greater than you, from crime to the divine. I hope you find the conversation as inspiring as I did. Simon, welcome to Personal Development Mastery. I'm grateful and it's a real joy to speak with you today.
Thank you, Aggie, and welcome. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. I know we've been planning it for a while, and it feels like this is the divine moment, of course.
It happens when it's meant to happen. And so for the listener, I will say that we've been planning this for a while and there were hiccups along the way, but here we are and it is perfect. Simon, what I will attempt to do during this conversation is with your book, From Burglar to Buddha, that is your autobiography that describes your journey of personal transformation. I would like to use the book and go through some periods of your life and, share the story with the learnings or some great insights, because there are many that I made notes of, and see where that leads us to. That's my intention or my plan. And I will also add one thing, that it is the subtitle of the book, which is, I will read it actually, From Burglar to Buddha, from an unconscious life of crime and drugs driven by fear to a conscious life of awareness, living high on love and truth in service to that which is greater than you, from crime to the divine. So I think that description really gives a very nice idea to the listener of what might follow in the conversation. So welcome again, Simon.
Thank you so much.
Shall we start your early ages and take it, shall we begin from there? Or maybe we can begin very briefly by sharing how we know each other, because we have met and connected through Gaianet. So maybe if you want to share a few things about that before we go back to your turbulent teenage years of burglary and shoplifting and these things.
Yeah. Yeah, why not? I mean, you and I met through a beautiful community, pioneering visionaries in a platform called Gaianet. And Gaianet for us is an opportunity to come together with the intention of living more in harmony with life and living a regenerative lifestyle, and actually birthing the seeds of what it means to be in a supportive network, a community, a space where we can share our gifts and resources and cultivate the foundations of a new civilization. And this is happening not just through Gaianet, but this is happening across the whole board. In my opinion, or the way I view reality, it's happening where for humanity to evolve, for humans to evolve anyway as a species, then it's really a time for us to come back to community, and real community, not just the idea of community, but the real intimacy of community. And you and I met there for a number of little online events, and then I reached out to you for some guidance and support because you also have many gifts to share, and you were there, and that's how we work in the community. We're there for each other if we need each other. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you told me you had a podcast, and I was super inspired, and then I had a book launching, and you're like, wow, would you like to come on the podcast? So I'm like, of course.
Yeah, it happened very effortlessly, and I read your book, and I don't say that very often, but I read all of the book cover to cover with great interest, and that doesn't happen to most of the books that I read. So I really enjoyed it, and I will try to get some elements of that book, and so that we can all be inspired by your own transformation from burglar to Buddha, as you say. So I will do then, Simon, I will go back then in time, and there was at that time when you were a teenager in England, you were at some point into crime, you were a burglar, and there is one phrase that I picked from the book that made a big impression on me. So you can comment on that or anything else from that period you feel wanting to share. But you were saying about burglary that it was nerve-wracking, and I will quote here what you said, that being chased literally feels like a life or death situation, and pure survival instincts are triggered, and your whole body goes into a different state of being, and you got, you enjoyed that sensation. So I'm starting with this because it's probably the very beginning from your early days, the burglar or the crime days of your past.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so it's interesting that I never realized this until later, when I had a greater understanding of the body and a greater understanding of the chemicals that are moving around our body. And although I had some understanding of addiction on some level, like I grew up in an environment where I was taking drugs and others that were taking drugs. So therefore, we understood what an addict or our projection of an addict looked like, like a heroin addict or a cocaine addict or somebody. But it wasn't until later in life, in my own deeper inquiry into the self, that I realized that I was actually addicted to adrenaline. And adrenaline and the release that the body receives chemically when you're in a fight or flight or freeze scenario. So what I was referencing there in the book was the buzz of the fear of committing a crime and then getting away with the crime, if you actually get away with it, then the heightened experience of going into that fear. And this is really when you think about even those that do a lot of extreme sports and those that really go to the edge of their you could call it a hobby, I guess, but they go to the edge. A lot of the times it's fear, the very essence of fear, or again, the adrenaline, the chemical release of facing our fears is very intoxicating. Yeah.
What you said about the extreme sports, I've done skydiving and bungee jumping, and it is that feeling, that adrenaline feeling you have is exhilarating.
Yeah,
indeed.
Yeah. One thing to add to that is what happens is actually, this is the irony, I guess, on some level, you get to taste death. And death being a huge topic that I explore and I question and so on, is that actually there's this sense of, I like the word you said, exhilaration in the potential of dying, even though there's some, we know we're not going to fully die, but going to that edge can also be very exhilarating. And simultaneously, when you dive deeper into the psyche, you realize that many of us, I speak for myself always, but many people I meet over the years, are actually, the deepest fear is the fear of death. And many of us are pondering that on a regular basis, but we're not fully admitting it. But day to day, there's a subtle undercurrent of a fear of dying. And so on some level, that feeds into our emotional experience. It feeds into our chemical experience of being human.
I hadn't thought of it like how you said that you get to taste death, but it makes complete sense now that you say to me in a way. And I also wanted to add one thing, because we started, and maybe I know that's the chronological way of things, but maybe it sounded a little bit unfair to begin our conversation with referring back to your those years. So I will add to that that I find that you sharing your story in such an honest and vulnerable way, and some elements of your story that not everyone would, share them publicly. And you told me earlier on, before we started recording, that this also allowed you to release and take that story out of you. So that for me also was a big realization, to realize that when you share something, it's not inside your mind anymore, and you can let go of that in a different way. So you gave me some ideas about myself as well, Simon. Thank you.
Yeah, somebody said recently to me that what happens is that, like, we live in myth, yeah? So mythological reality, like everything is story on some level, and at the same time we're not our story, because you can never really know somebody's full story. So the journey that I have shared is a fragment, and at the same time, as you said, a kind of chronological journey up to a certain point of my own personal awakening. And one of the things I wanted to exercise, or I believe that the world would benefit from, is transparency. So transparency became a big topic in my life. And of course, when you're talking about certain things that you've done in life that are in a society perspective wrong or bad, or you don't talk about those things, especially around crime, criminal activities, and taking drugs, and most people won't talk about those experiences because in our society it's deemed as wrong. You're not you shouldn't be doing that, or if you do it, you do it undercover. And so the kind of the journey that I went on was that if we want to see a world of truth, if we want to see a world of sincerity, then we have to be sincere with ourselves and speak our truth. And it's not an easy thing to do when you've grown up in a foundation of our default setting is lying. So yeah, it was a very as you said, vulnerable, and still it is. It's like you put something like this out into the world, and although I've relinquished that story now, because my friend said, like, when we mythologize our story, when we mythologize it, he said it was like a ceremony of self-recognition. And I told you this earlier, but just for the listeners, this was really interesting for me, because what happened is I realized that through the process of writing this story over a long period of time in different variations, what I was actually doing was acknowledging myself and recognizing myself, and through that process I was able to relinquish my attachments to the identification of the persona that I had been, or the many different personas that I had been throughout the past. So I was able to free myself from those characters.
Was there a point, Simon, where I remember reading your book that you had, naturally, I think most people would, had guilt and shame about that behavior. Was there a point where you managed to go past that in order to be able to share that with a broad audience?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I can share a little. I don't know if I wrote this in the book, if this made it into the book, but there was a moment, I think I mentioned it. So there was a moment where I had already written a lot of the story down and a lot of my past very, very vividly, and a kind of in a cathartic expression of just like stream of consciousness. And I had if I remember rightly, 100 pages of, on the Word document, around 100 pages that had just come out with different stories that I'd experienced and so on. And I actually took it to a friend to read it for the first time. And he was a director, or film director. And because I went on this quest to become a famous actor and a performer, I at the time I thought, why don't I read this story to my friend Sav and let him feel into it. So I went to his and read him pretty much what I had written. Yeah. And that was a moment of real, like, all of a sudden I'm going to tell somebody for the first time these experiences that I had had. So that was a huge moment of facing the guilt and the shame. Because for me, Aggie, the guilt means I did something wrong, and shame means I am wrong. Yeah, this is how Brené Brown describes it. It's like shame is like I am wrong, and guilt is I've done something wrong. So yeah, there's no question about it that really the depth of shame and guilt that I was holding on to was quite dense, because in our society, crime in its essence is one of the main things that is seen as wrong. You are wrong. You've done something wrong. When you steal, we're told from such a young age, when you take what's not yours, you are wrong. So actually, my whole a big chunk of my youth, even up all through my 20s as well, because I was taking drugs and really very much doing what is wrong. So yeah, there's a lot that you have to feel and face when you look at that. Yeah.
Thank you. I will carry on what you started saying just now then about being wrong and the drugs and alcohol, things that, and you also said earlier on that many people do that, but they do it covertly. They don't necessarily speak out about this thing. You will rarely hear that outside. There was, and again I'm going to refer back to a point in your book that you were talking about, that period of drinking and having drugs. So you said that at some point you realized that they were part of a persona that you had that was not ready to die yet. So you wanted, to steer clear of them. And I think this conversation or this topic might be relevant for many people that, they realize that I don't want to keep on doing this, but they keep on doing this. And so you described it in such a way that it was a part of your persona not ready to die yet. So I really like that as a description. It also implies that it's not ready to die yet. There is something holding it, and maybe something needs to change on a deeper level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the journey of the persona. The personas that we create, they become who we are. So what was not really ready to die was that I had identified myself as that being. So there's a sense of confirmation and justification and upholding the belief of this character. And again, when we reference this journey that I've been on, like, I never had that awareness at all back then, that I was a character, that I was a persona, that I was, that's like, as you're growing up, for me, that you think that's who you are. So your whole life is created around that. The beings that you meet, the friends you have, your day-to-day routines, everything's built up around this character. So when that persona has to be let go of, again, I'm going to use the word death, because you go through a huge death and you have to die to your behaviors, your actions, your friendships, your environment, your habits, your addictions. Like, so it's like, actually, it's a whole cleanse of everything that you thought was your reality. So that and that hasn't happened just once or twice. This has happened multiple times and still happens now. But back then, there was so much fear and worry of like, what is the unknown? Who am I if I'm not this person? Yeah. and then what's beautiful is, as you evolve and you realize that you're not a person, this is the greater awareness, of course, then you're not so identified to basically you don't take yourself so seriously anymore, because you realize that's not who you are. Yeah, but of course, it's a journey.
Yeah, it's actually what you're saying now about the persona and the realization that you were playing a role, or we are playing a role, or different roles. Brings me to the next bit, which is the acting, which you did actually play roles professionally you during your acting career. And there was one thing, again, that I've highlighted from the book. You said that acting taught you a lot about the human psyche, and you would observe other people and your own behavior. And I'm wondering now, based on what you just said earlier about realizing that you are a character, or you have some character traits that die. So I'm wondering how much your acting or being an actor actually helped in seeing that for yourself, that it is a role.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful lead-in. Thank you for that. And yeah, there was this moment for me where I kind of later on, when I started meditating, this came some years later, and I was reflecting on, I used to really at times judge the experiences I had around drugs, judge the crime that I did. I used to judge even being an actor, you know. I went into this kind of process of like, acting was just about the ego, and it was just about me wanting to be seen and wanting to be famous. And I kind of went into this whole process and actually felt really let down because acting was the lifeline that I needed in order to pull me out of the world of crime and addiction and drugs and kind of hedonism that I was stuck in. So the drive to be an actor was actually kind of a lifeline, a hope, a potential of a new world. And it really helped as that anchor. It was an amazing anchor. But I never gave it, and I don't think I even mentioned this fully in the book as well, of how much acting helped me to know who I'm not, basically. It's like it helped me to know who I'm not. But I felt really let down because I went into the acting world thinking it was something that it wasn't. And actually I was just going in to the same kind of persona world, even more persona world, and even more characters that were still just taking drugs and drinking alcohol and kind of lost and you know, and I glorified it in my dream, in my fantasy. I'd glorified it. And so what had to happen, there was a moment where now this persona of the actor and this glorification of this reality also had to crumble. And I was like, oh, this has been 12 years of like 13 years of my life. And actually it's all a facade, it's all an act. And ironically, coming back to your beautiful lead-in, was the beautiful thing about witnessing yourself and learning about characters. You start to learn about the thought patterns or the habits and the little idiosyncrasies that create a character, that make up a character. So you start to look at these behaviors and these personality traits of different characters, like what drives them, what fuels them, what motivates them, what gives them motive to live. And this was really insightful for me when I started to reflect on society and humanity, and how we, through conditioned thinking and through conditioned patterns in our subconscious, we actually manifest reality and replicate reality from within the subconscious. And so I started to have a kind of deeper look inside of, you know, if we want to look at the world outside as a theater, as you will, as a stage, or as Shakespeare said, you know, the world is a stage, then how is those stages being created? And then you look at the kind of what acting is, and it's about writing a script and then finding a producer to make the script, and then you find the actors and the supporting cast and the lead characters, and then you build a set, and then you put these characters in the set, and then you film the set and you tell a story. And so then I kind of panned out from that and go, wow, that is actually how reality is happening constantly, regardless of the so-called cinema and theatre that we're also playing inside the kind of fractal of, you know, the stage. So I was like, wow, this is tripping me out. And I wasn't taking drugs at this point at all.
I had goosebumps with what you just said about panning out and realizing that this is what happens with our reality, and it's a very, very important lesson. let me move on now. I
Yes,
think we're
please.
really getting to some a different context now, and I want to discuss your awakening journey. Of course, again, there are so many things. I have highlighted a couple of things. The first one, it really made a big impression on me, and it is something that I would love to do at some point. I haven't done it yet, but your book brought it back into my memory. What I want to do is the Vipassana, the 10-day silent meditation retreat that you did. So I have my own calling to do something to do that as well. So your book was a great reminder for me. But do you want to share from that experience, what was the transformation? One that has never done something like that can only imagine, if they even can imagine, how it might be to be in complete silence for 10 days and not speak, not write, not have any of the distractions that you have apart from your own mind. So I would really love you to hear your reflections on that.
Yes, Vipassana was a stage in the awakening process. And when we ask, like you say, like this awakening moment, right? That often people ask, like, at what moment did you really, and I know you're not asking this, but people do ask along the way, like, what moment was the key moment, that you just awoke and then you was just awake and then all of a sudden life was different. And again, I will say that there were times in the last decade where I would also be thinking of, like, when were these moments? Like, when were these key moments? And I often had them just in these glorified sections, no? Like, for example, Vipassana, or meeting Anna, this being that I, fell in love with, but at the same time, the catalyst that opened me to a greater love, which, she played as a kind of, I call it more of an alchemy, a key figure in our journey that opens us up to something that we didn't perceive before. And it's often, they sometimes don't even know they're doing that. So these moments, and then there was another moment when I was in jail for a short time, and I spoke about this being in the remand center for 9.5 weeks. And there was moments in that time, even when I was 18, that I was awakening, because I was questioning society and I was questioning this prison environment, and actually seeing the prison environment on the outside, a bit like what I just told you was happening with the whole acting world, and seeing the stage outside. So there was moments even when I was 18, 19, where this kind of like questioning reality was taking place. And then when it later on in life, as becoming more aware, you could say, it's like awareness is the awakening. How aware are we? And so Vipassana really played into a great opportunity to look and to witness. And so I had been meditating for some time, but not much, like yoga practice, and then at the end of yoga practice, sitting for maybe 5-10 minutes, or just becoming more meditative, you could say, through certain. I read some books on meditation, so I started to have a curiosity about meditation. But it really wasn't until I did and followed the journey of that first 10-day silent meditation retreat that was again a key catalyst in actually what is going on inside me. Like, this was just a real opportunity to just look, like, what is going on? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And can I just silence everything else? I mean, this is the gift that I feel Vipassana offers. Can everything else just be forgotten about and silenced for a while? Of course, it's not so silent inside.
I bet.
but at least the act of taking things away, like writing, mobile phone, friends, environment, at least taking those things away for 10 days allows the opportunity to listen to something else. Yeah. And so that first initial 10 days was really gave me a great experience of what it means to sit still and observe. And again, that played as part of a catalyst of supporting more awareness.
Hi, it's Aggie here, interrupting you with something you may find useful. One of the most frustrating feelings is when you're trying to focus, but you can't get your brain to concentrate on the important work in front of you. This happens to me all the time, and if it happens to you too, you are not alone. 40% of people say they have to make a big effort to concentrate. But if you're having trouble getting focused, I have a solution for you. I'm so excited to be partnering with Brain FM. Brain FM is a great app, and I use it to block out my mental chatter and zone in on my number one priority of the day. Brain FM uses functional music that is backed by science and research, and it is designed to give us that extra edge when we need our undivided attention. And they also have relaxation, meditation, and deep sleep modules that help you unwind and recharge. So if you want to be able to place your full attention exclusively in the activity you choose, whether that's meaningful work or relaxing or getting high quality sleep, right now as my podcast listener, you get 20% off Brain FM subscription at brain.fm/Aggie. That's an amazing deal for such a useful app. Thousands of people have given 5-star reviews to Brain FM. Find out why? brain.fm/Aggie. Thank you. And you refer to these events as catalysts, or so it's rather than a moment or some specific point in time. I also think and believe that they do adapt these moments one after the other. They give you a different perspective or a different level of awareness, and then you move to another one and another one. I don't know if I think Eckhart Tolle has a moment. You can say that it was that night that he changed, but that is a little bit of a very unique situation, I think, rather than the.
Yeah, and I read the book of Eckhart Tolle, and I was inspired by The Power of Now and other books along the way. But again, I think even that moment, like that you referenced, when he kind of had the an epiphany moment, which I could reference some of those too, like many can, no? Like when I met Anna and like having this time with meeting this partner, which I thought was, I just thought I was falling in love, but something else was happening, and it wasn't about the personal love, but something was opening me up to something far greater. And then what I realized when just looking back is, these moments, because we're so interconnected with everything, Aggie. Yeah, it's like they're not just these separate moments. They're like continuations of the orchestra of life that play in, and then we just remember some little heightened moments, like, oh, the birds were there, and but ultimately it's like it's this one constant opening, to life. That's what it feels like for me.
That's great. And yes, it's the listener can't see you, but you were really using your whole body to express what you just said. So that's beautiful. Yeah. Simon, I want also to ask you about those conversations that you started having, the Simon on the Sofa, which was like interviews or conversations with intriguing people. And again, I want to ask maybe how that transformed you, and maybe some of the key learnings that came from you having conversations like like we're having now, because I'm going to save my own learnings for some other time, but I want to hear yours. Obviously there are many, but whatever comes to you to share with me.
Well, you said it earlier, actually, didn't you? You said to me at the beginning that one of the things this podcast has done for you is given you a great mirror into aspects of yourself that you were not aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good and bad.
Yeah. And I feel that you have a full understanding of this because of what you're doing here with this podcast. And what drove me, I didn't even know at the time, and we're laughing like I didn't know about marketing and all these things, and I still along the way got caught up in the system that I was seeing as false, right? So it's many aspects of society and how it's built I see as false. I believe that we're playing a game in our society which is really a dysfunctional game on so many levels. And I can elaborate on that if needed, but like more importantly is like when we see the delusion of ourselves and we see the delusion of how these structures have been built, I wanted to create conversations, and I was just inspired. Like, is there anybody speaking truth in the world? Like, I had this whole epiphany moment where I was like, I need to stop lying because all I'm seeing everywhere is lies. I'm lying. I was a liar. I was telling lies. I wasn't being honest to myself, to others. I was fabricating stories. I was glorifying certain situations which were not really that glorious. And I was acting in the drive of being an actor. And I was like, and when I had this like epiphany moments, I was like, wow, oh, it all makes sense. If we stop lying, then everything will change. If I stop lying and like, if everybody else stops lying, then so much of the society that is built on lies will just not exist. And I was like, oh yes, it's really easy, Aggie. It's easy. We just have to all stop lying, right? And I was going like, yes, epiphany. I've got the answer, right? and of course, then you go, who else? Who else? Is anybody else doing this? So Simon on the Sofa was this kind of quest to go, is there others out there in the world that are seeing life the way I'm seeing life? I felt a little bit like, am I just on my own in this kind of trip, So I went on this quest to create conversations around truth. But of course, Aggie, you're going to know this. I then realized all I'm doing is getting mirror reflections of my own self that is not speaking truth still, is still scared to go into certain areas of topic, of conversation, still scared to, really express what I want to say, and holding myself back and meeting people and sometimes like not fully agreeing with them or believing them, but still not having the courage to communicate my truth. And I went through a whole process through those conversations. And actually they played as part of my ultimate transformation, because they were like putting yourself in the practice of speaking truth and mirroring myself through every single conversation I had. So it was kind of part of my own personal therapy. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. I can relate to that. I mean, the word, it's interesting that you use the word therapy. When I started my first podcast with a co-host, we were doing it and we were saying this is our therapy. We actually said that because it is, you just share things. And what you just told me about the conversations and how they allowed you to see things about yourself and be able to express things that you were holding back because of, I don't know, conditioning or other reasons. Now I am going to ask you a similar question that before. Was there any point when it's tipped over the other side and you were able to share or to discuss sensitive topics, or to say to your guest, you know what, I completely disagree with you, maybe in a more subtle way, but did you go over to that side as a result of you having these conversations at some point?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So, yeah, like you said, in a subtle way, because what I wanted to start to own, and still this is part of this living transparently, is that transparent communication doesn't mean you just have to tell everybody what you think about them, and you just have to be like, blatant and say, well, you're a liar or you're this. Transparency is not brutality. Actually, transparency for me became an inside job. So what I mean by that, it was like, am I being truthful to me? Am I being truthful to what I feel inside of me? And can I just express from that place? And so what I learned through these conversations was that you and I don't have to agree, but everything that's happening for you or for me is valid, but it doesn't mean it's all true. So what happened is I started to get a different way of engaging, and not feeling like I have to agree with somebody in order for us to have a good conversation. Actually, it's sometimes actually the not agreeing can create a much more rich conversation. And so I overcome my fear of actually being able to say what I'm really thinking and feeling in the moment. And then that's changed now. So for example, when somebody to give a kind of a more practical example, if somebody starts talking to me about a topic, let's say angels, or angels communicating to them in their life, and so if I don't feel that I have angels communicating to me, I can communicate from that place that this is beautiful to listen to and hear, and I'm interested in your perspective on it, but it doesn't resonate fully for me because I don't actually have communication to angels. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that I don't agree with you. But I'm actually, then there's a curiosity that can come, that maybe I can learn something from you, as opposed to just be like, sort of stuck in my own projection of how I perceive reality. And so what happened, each conversation opened me to the infinite potential in this cosmic soup, and that it's all valid on some level, and everybody's having their own direct experience with this mystery. And that really changed the way that I was able to move from my own ego's perspective, because the ego is still there, of like, reality is how I see it, how Simon sees it. And so that persona died as well. But that persona was really, I loved that persona. That was the one that all of a sudden had worked out reality. The one that knew the answers to everything. Oh man, that was part of the awakening process, Agi. It's like you awaken, and then you have a superior ego, spiritual superior ego, where you're like, now I'm awakened, and I project that I now know the answers to everything, and I'm the enlightened one. And then you realize, oh no, damn, I just created another character.
Yes, it's a subtle trap I have read about, that many people fall into, that spiritual superiority. But
I fell into that one.
I will leave that for now. I actually want to ask you, Simon, to take us now forward and to the present moment. We spoke quite a bit about your book and your pasts, but tell me, what are you doing now? What is your situation now, and your? Let's start with that. I don't want to ask you two questions at the same time.
Yeah, this is a beautiful one to ask me today, because this journey of awareness. So when I write in the book Burglar to Buddha, it's a big statement, no? It's a big statement to call myself Buddha. Yeah? Because most beings will be like, who does he think he is, calling himself Buddha, right? I haven't studied Buddhism. I haven't meditated on the Himalayas for years on end. I haven't renounced everything. So who am I to call myself Buddha? And so my exploration of Buddha of Buddhahood is really the greater awareness. This is my interpretation of it, the greater awareness of our divinity, that we are divine beings. And not that we're divine beings just when we've read Eckhart Tolle, but we're divine beings from the moment of our inception. And so my dedication is to celebrate that divinity within myself and to support others to realize that their own divinity. And what I mean by that is that a lot of this can sound conceptual because we use words to describe that which cannot really be named, because we're playing in the mystery and then we're playing in the funky paradox of reality, and it can all get kind of convoluted and conceptual and even dogmatic on so many levels. So where I'm at the moment, Agni, is it's really about, I am whole, I am complete, I am done. Life is doing me, and I am here as the mystery, as this expression of life force. And we call it love, we call it source, we call it creation, we call it all these different names to express what seems to be inexpressible. And so I'm playing with the mystery, and that's my devotion, is to play with the mystery. And what I've learned from myself is the beautiful way to play with the mystery is to support others to realize that they can play with the mystery, and that they can play with themselves, and they can play with themselves without guilt and without shame and without that they're less than, and without this deep rooted, which I believe is false. And I don't really like the word I believe, because belief itself is flawed. But like this idea that we are unworthy, there's a deep rooted belief system in our species called the core unworthiness. This is a term that a friend, Ted Steiner, on one of my Simon on the Sofa talks, spoke about. And he spoke that through religion there birthed this core unworthiness. And what happened is that when humans take on board this core unworthiness, we see ourselves as constantly flawed, constantly imperfect, and constantly in competition with other, because we don't see ourselves as whole, perfect, and divine. And so for me, this is a distortion that has created so many conflicts, so much self-abuse, so much war. And so I evoke and welcome everyone back into the playful, laughing Buddha, the laughing Buddha that laughs at it all and realizes that it's all a play. And so I went from taking life so seriously, caught up in the illusion and the delusion of reality, went on a quest to be a performer, an actor, and play, in the theater, in this like cosmic dance, and then realized that, wow, the whole thing is one big play. And if I want to contribute to humanity, what do I want to offer? And the only question that came was, the only answer that came, Aggie, was be love. Amplify love. And so this is kind of my devotion.
This is beautiful, Simon. Thank you. I will reiterate back some of those things or some words that you said. Well, I will start with what you just said. Be love yourself and amplify love with others. And earlier you said celebrating your divinity and support others to realize their divinity. And again, it is the way that you express it, and that I really appreciate and enjoy the way you describe it, because it is, you know very well that many times it's difficult to, with words, to express. You already said the inexpressible. It's difficult to express it, and I think you have done that in a very. It spoke to me the way you said, celebrate my divinity, or playing with the mystery, as you said. What a beautiful description there is for life versus the distorted reality that we experience through our mind. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I will also make one last comment about that, because you mentioned the Buddha in the title of your book. When I saw that, I immediately, personally, I saw it as a symbolism. Like, you're not saying that you are Buddha or you have attained Buddhahood, or if such a thing exists. It is a symbol of a metaphor of the change. So maybe two extremes. So for me, it didn't sound. It actually sounded more intriguing to read the book rather than insulting to the name of Buddha or anything like that. That's just my own observation that came to me when you were saying that. I hadn't thought of it before.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's exactly what it is. It's the message for me, and I'm sure you know this from your wisdom and your experience of this life, is that there's certain messages that come from beings before us. And one of the greatest messages that I noticed in so many the beings that I've been inspired by, those that really have seen and opened their eyes, I see them as very playful and this is really beautiful what I'm going to say now for those listening as well. Not childish, because I was childish for a long, long time, but childlike. And there's a big difference. So right now in the world, I care, but I don't carry. And that means that I care about what's happening in the world. I care about where humanity is going. I care about the violence that we see unnecessary in my take. And I understand that there's a deep perfection in all of it. But at the same time, I want to offer my contribution to, and like you and I do, and like Gaianet, we come full circle back to Gaianet. Like Gaianet does, we want to offer a playground of potential where we can live as these awakened, embodied beings, these sovereign beings who are in service to one another, in service to the divine, in service to reverence of this gift of life, and really seeing it and feeling it as a precious gift of life, not as something to be taken for granted, not as something to be thrown in the bin, not as something to be wasted, but something to be revered. And that for me, Aggie, if there's any transformation, that I get tingles. My whole body is goosebumps right now. Look, I have got goosebumps over my whole arms. All of my hairs are on end. And that tells me that we are tapping in to something purely, I call it pure truth. That we are here to celebrate this magnitude of this gift that we have all been given completely for free. Completely for free. And so it's not for sale, but it's definitely here to be experienced.
Thank you. A precious gift of life to be revered. I will keep that phrase. I will write it and put it somewhere for when I'm experiencing, the dark moments.
Yes, it will happen.
Simon, it happens. We have reached the point right now. I think we talked about this briefly before we started recording, that we could either go to 2-3 hours or wrap things up. So yes. I'm not going to go into a very very marathon conversation. So I would, first of all, I will appreciate very much everything that you've shared so far, but I do have some last quick questions to wrap things up that I really want to ask you as well, to see your take of it. It's questions I ask to all of my guests. And the first one is, what does the term personal development mean to you?
We've been talking about personas and on some level dissolving our personas and being the vast sovereign beings that we are. And so for me, it's about developing ourselves. And I think when I say this right now, and I think of the word develop, what pops up is this old cameras with you used to have to shake the image, no?
Polaroid.
The Polaroid, thank you.
Yes.
And you used to have to shake it. So as you asked me, I had this vision of the Polaroid, and what we're doing is we're shaking the Polaroid in order to see who we truly are. And that for me is what personal development is. And what I love about you calling it personal development mastery, the mastery of that is the consistency to show up and face our shadows and face all of what we've been through in order to see who we truly are. And that for me, that mastery comes from consistency and repetition. So that's what comes up in this moment.
Thank you. I agree completely. Tell me one hypothetical question as well. If you could go back in time and meet the 18-year-old Simon, what's one piece of advice you would tell him?
Oh God, the 18-year-old Simon. Well, the thing that's popping up right now is learn other languages. learn other languages so that you can have a deeper understanding of interconnection through multiple languages. One of the things that I've often considered when I played around in school and just wanted to, mess around, and my energy was very uncontrollable. I look back sometimes, not with regret, but definitely learning other languages, I feel would have expanded my potential to understand the human condition. So, yeah, and you will know this, but there's the different language. Although there's a universal language which I would call love, when I meet other friends and other beings on this path that communicate in a different language, they've told me that they create a different being and they perceive reality in different ways. And so this is one thing that I feel I would have probably told my 18-year-old.
That's great.
Does that resonate? Do you have this experience?
It does. I have been bilingual. Well, I'm a Greek originally, so if I think of something in Greek and if I think about it in English, it's not exactly the same thing. So there are nuances there, and it's very interesting to observe that. Thank you for sharing that. Simon, we set the intention at the beginning before we started recording. We set the intention for this conversation to give to the listener opportunities for transformation. The way I look at our conversation, I believe that we have. Emerging from the conversation, if you were to give to the listener one more thing, something, maybe an action that he or she can take towards, what we have been talking, or even the awakening journey or the transformation, what actionable element could you share, or would you share?
The one thing popping up as soon as you begin to ask the question is make a decision today to never lie again to yourself.
Beautiful.
This decision will change your whole life.
Thank you. Please share with us as well, how can people connect with you and where they can find more information about this wonderful being that Simon is, and I'm really delighted to have had this conversation very much.
I really appreciate you, Aggie, and I love that our friendship is growing and through this conversation. So I really want to acknowledge you and for what you're doing and the conversations you're sharing with the world. And I know how much work and time goes into that and commitment. And I know you do it from a place of love and truth. And I really appreciate that. So thank you for inviting me today. Thank you for also reading my book, or the whole book, because I also know that that's not something that we all have time to do. So I really appreciate you and your sincerity. And people can find me. At the moment, I'm using a Telegram channel where I show up and share my unfoldings, my life, and we have a love stream, a weekly love stream, and really this quest that I'm on to, just to support more play in the world. And that Telegram channel is under the name Simon Transparently, at Simon Transparently. And then the website that I'm currently designing and putting together is also called simontransparently.com. And these are the two channels that I'm mainly bringing more focus to over this coming year. So thank you for asking. And and always, Aggie, I say as well, it's like, the ultimate calling is always inside. And it's not just what you can get from me or from you or from anybody. It's really, the calling is always to go inside. So the best place to go first is inside. And then if you want to come and hang out with me sometimes, you can go outside.
I will leave that as an epilogue of this wonderful conversation, that the best place to go is inside. It certainly is. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone listening.
I hope you enjoyed listening and that you got a huge amount of value from today's episode. If you have, please share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to know more about what I do, visit my website agikeramidas.com. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,